Business Weekly, brought to you by National Social Security Fund, NSSF. We secure your future.
On this week's edition of the program, we look at the timeliness of economic statistics in the country and whether they play a critical role in shaping up Kenya's destiny. We also talk to Anthony Kilele, the Director General at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. That's on the executive wing. Remember that you can send in your questions, comments and observations to the SMS number 8041 or email address ktnbizweekly@standardmedia.co.ke. Good evening and welcome to this edition of KTN Business Weekly. I'm Michael Oyer. Economies the world over rely on economic data and statistics to plan and forge new ways to spearhead economic growth. Kenya is no exception, especially as it's prone to numerous shocks that destabilize growth momentum. However, questions have been raised over the timeliness and quality of Kenyan data to guide economic planning. And on this edition of KTN Business Weekly, we seek to find out just how relevant Kenyan economic data is and what can be done to improve on it.
Information is power, which if used in the correct manner, leads to the empowerment of the people. That is why Article 43 of the new Constitution calls for the dissemination of information to empower Kenyans towards making better decisions. One way information can be used is in kickstarting economic growth. It is with this in mind that the government created the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, a semi-autonomous government agency. The body is mandated to collect, crunch and disseminate data to be used by both policymakers and investors towards making sound investment and economic decisions. However, there have been questions raised in some quarters of the timeliness and ease of access of the data released by the National Bureau.
The concept of collecting data in a country is a world need. It's not just a Kenyan need, it's a world need. So statistics all over the world are actually guided by very established procedures and processes. The Bureau actually has data on a continuous basis. It is how now the structure, what I would call the structure of government, what does government think is important for people? Over time, the economic survey, which is an annual process, has taken a lot of time and it's given a lot of emphasis. It's released in a very big way.
Most economic data can only be historical in the sense that you only have a firm idea about what the real numbers were, whether it's for GDP, whether it's for inflation and everything else after the facts. I'm sure, they are forecasters, but really it's not often the business of government generally to make the forecasts, and often those forecasts tend to have very big errors.
Without understanding these issues, it's very difficult to design the right policies. So if you have the data, you can actually design much better policies. Of course, it may be that there isn't any data. Then you still have to make policies and you still have to do something. You still have to design interventions. But then it's important that you collect data as you go along so that when you're done with the interventions, you can evaluate them and you can form a knowledge on what works and what doesn't work.
Making concrete decisions on economic numbers is largely dependent on the availability of data that then shapes public debate. However, with most data, especially on commodity pricing, income groups and employment levels not readily available, it has created a loophole where matters have been taken up by interest groups, working largely on assumption who end up having a bearing on policy decisions.
To be honest, when you do not have the most accurate data, more often than not what people do is they make certain assumptions. And sometimes when you see the assumptions that have been made about some critical data in Kenya, they are very, very brave assumptions, in many cases even wrong.
The yesterday of government has tended to retain data at very selected levels. We also know that part of the constitutional thinking in terms of the right of information is that some people also use data wrongly. For example, you know the areas of the economy that are growing. Instead of giving everybody, you give a few. So you'll be having selected Kenyans investing in certain ways because they have better information than the others.
There has been some progress. You may be aware that since 2003, Kenya has had a monitoring and evaluation strategy which has been updated a few years ago, and there's also a new M&E policy on the way. So this is government strategy to improve the use and to focus increasingly on results. Although Kenya has made progress, there's still a while to go.
A staff report by the African Department of the International Monetary Fund says that even as the overall quality, timeliness, and coverage of macroeconomic statistics have improved over the past few years, further improvements in the method of compiling real fiscal and external sector statistics is needed in the country.
What Kenya needs to improve, it's both the range of statistics that are covered, it's also the quality and the accuracy of the data. And then it is the timeliness of release. Although timeliness has improved, some statistics are still produced with very long lags. And then lastly, the making statistics available to wananchi. There has been very good progress in some areas.
Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has consistently been releasing quarterly economic reports as well as inflation data on a month-on-month basis. But there is a feeling it is time the Bureau began expanding its portfolio in terms of the information it releases to the public. The feeling is that data on jobs, unemployment levels, commodity prices, stock exchange performance on a weekly basis would be just as important to the economic development.
The power of statistics in every nation is a very big catalyst for economic development. It's a very big catalyst for economic empowerment. And therefore, Kenya Bureau of Statistics should be encouraged not only to concentrate on what I would call the regular, but the abnormal. For example, we have excess funds. What does that mean to our pattern of energy costs?
This then begs the question, is it time to empower institutions, say the private sector, to begin collecting and disseminating data?
Kenyans should know that Kenya Bureau of Statistics on a monthly basis collects statistics from industry. So anything manufactured in this country each month is already captured by statistics. But that information doesn't flow back to the population. And it's important that that is then shared so that people are empowered. So I think if the focus is changed from just looking at data for data to now an empowerment process.
As it stands today, there's nothing that prevents a think tank or any private entity from actually generating its own data. It is only that it would be inordinately expensive and impractical. Why? Because most of the data that people demand exists within government domains and departments. For instance, if we wanted to find out how many teachers are employed in Kenya, where they are situated, how many students are in Kenya, and how many students attended school yesterday, that data cannot be available to any private entity easily. It is only government which employs and which has those statistical offices, or rather, which has those offices and departments that can put together that data. So to that extent, a monopoly in the hands of government will have to remain. The only way to resolve it is then to show that there is good faith and adherence to the law in ensuring that data in the public domain, one, is generated in an accurate way and it is published to the public.
There have been great strides made by different agencies in publishing information. For instance, the Nairobi Securities Exchange releases real-time data on the performance of stocks, helping investors make informed decisions. The Central Bank of Kenya also has timely updates on the trading of the Kenya shilling, as well as circulars whenever they make policy changes. This information is however limited to a few with access to broadband, which creates the need for the information to be channeled further.
The Central Bank posts their data on their website, but they don't tell Kenyans that we have done the posting. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics also does the same. They update their quarterly page. So those of us who do research on data, we know where to go for the data. But the ordinary Wajiko doesn't, in a day-to-day basis, know whether you have posted anything or not. So the way I would want us to kind of help our viewers is to encourage them to insist that Kenya National Bureau of Statistics on a monthly basis should at least tell Kenyans what part of data is put where.
The moment there's data, it'll be used. And the interesting part is that the moment there's data where there was no data previously, decision makers will immediately demand more. So they will say, oh, this is great, but we need even more. We need this, this, and the other. And so I think Kenya is in an advantageous position where it can improve data production, improve quality, timeliness. It can strengthen the monitoring and evaluation systems that governs how we use it for decision making, and it can put the data out there. Then data will also help to increase transparency, will help to increase accountability, and I think that's everyone's wish for Kenya.
Granted, the government's economic blueprint is pegged on a 10% annual GDP growth, available data shows downward trend of 5.4% in 2010 and 4.4% in 2011. Perhaps more readily available data presented to the populace could be just the stimulus required to get the economy back on track.
Time for a break now, but when we return...
At the point of buying, we only require a minimum of 10% of the purchase price.
Household-based surveys are different from the economic surveys.
Our guest on the executive wing is the Director General at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Anthony Kilele. Please do keep it KTN Business Weekly.
The National Social Security Fund runs a portfolio that stands at 120 billion Kenya shillings in terms of value.
Our investment in real estate mainly is spread within Nairobi County and Mombasa. Nairobi County, we got the two categories, that is commercial and residential. Mainly commercial in terms of commercial buildings, for example, like the NSSF complex, Bruce House, Zina Towers, Fuel Park Towers, among other buildings. Then we also have residential buildings, but mostly which are sold out. That is, for example, like Nyayo Estate in Embakasi. We got Kitsuru, we got Mountain View, and we got some houses in Kibera High-Rise. But these are normally sold to tenants, or rather they've been sold to tenants on tenant purchase scheme. The distinction, especially between our developments, is that for the residential houses, we do not really demand a lot of, we don't put them under a lot of preconditions in terms of accessing. What normally happens is that at the point of buying, we only require a minimum of 10% of the purchase price. And once that has been paid, then you demonstrate that you're able to pay the monthly installments. Then of course you qualified. When you compare with, for instance, mortgage institutions, the preconditions are so many. In terms of the commercial segment, this one will develop with a view to earning a return on the investment in terms of rental incomes. And like any other commercial development, there may not be a lot of difference other than our quality in terms of buildings, quality in terms of maintenance, and quality in terms of vetting in terms of tenancy.
It's good to invest in real estate because it does not depreciate. So you have your house there and you're getting returns like a monthly income. So at the end of it, when you don't want that house, you can sell it and it will have appreciated in value, so you recoup back your initial investment.
Mr. Chengo took the opportunity to make clarifications in regard to the Hazina Estate property.
The Hazina challenge is not really a big challenge. That has already been sorted out. I would say it was some bit of either misunderstanding on the part of a number of the purchasers. But the title deeds for Hazina have already been procured.
It's been many years. We finished paying for this property in the year 2006, but we were unable to transfer because there was the duplication of the title deeds. So today marks a very good day for us, and we are happy with this. Hope we will be able to transfer it fast. There was some security in the sense that we could not lose, and probably when the Sololo issue came up, we felt like we were losing out, but now we have the titles, we are comfortable.
Welcome to the Executive Wing. Tonight we'll be talking to the Director General of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Anthony Kilele, on the importance of data generation and how it's disseminated to the public. Welcome, Madam Director. Probably just to get things started off, how important is data generation in Kenya in terms of guiding policy making and in the development of our economy?
Well, I think it is very important, because that is the one that gives you the state of the economy. I mean, which sectors are growing, the overall growth rate, and all that. So, in a nutshell, it virtually tells you where is the country heading to. Therefore, its importance is I don't know exactly what to say, but it's overwhelming, because industry uses it to plan, government also uses it to plan, also to monitor the progress, especially on the Vision 20. Are you achieving targets? Yeah. So, it gives generally the whole economic sectors. Yeah.
Some quarters have questioned the timeliness of the way the data released by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is issued. Probably, what's the norm, and how fast probably is this information supposed to be released to the public?
Well, it matters on which one. Like, if we are talking about the economic survey gives you the year before up to the 31st December. But again, don't forget that we also release the quarterly GDP figures. That also again gives that. We're in the process of collecting data. We hope that in the next, at least before June, because generally there is a lag period of 3 months, and that is world over. So we hope that by June, end of June, we will be releasing the first quarter. So that actually gives you also, a way of making sure that we are keeping the citizens informed.
Then again, Bonadiji, how about the dissemination and how accessible it is? Is there probably a situation where we are going to have information put on a database so that people are able to access the information you generate and able to use them in making their decisions?
Well, I think the issue of dissemination, let me just give you a quick answer, especially on inflation. The inflation data, I mean, it's so crucial, both to government and to the private sector, that nowadays that we release it before noon, either on 30th or 31st or latest first, not as if it falls on a weekend. And I can tell you that by the time, if it passes 12 o'clock, people are calling. So what we have done, and that is not only us, there are also international, we've got the Reuters, we've got the Bloomberg group, that are also everybody in the newspaper and the media, the local media that are looking for this. So what we do is, because we actually release data on a level playing field. So you'll find that immediately we release the inflation figures. We send to the media houses across board at the same time. The email leaves at the same time. And within 5 minutes, it's in the website. So that's the way we disseminate. Of course, after that, the media will move it to the next level of the newspapers and also the TV. Now, on the issue of the economic survey, just giving you the one we released last week, is that we do have a major release. Then thereafter, again, it's released to government, different departments of government. Industry picks the major highlights from the website again. And again, of course, I'll read the commentary, that the analysis that is actually in the newspaper, which has been running for over a week actually in different sectors. We do have actually two databases. One we call the EMIS, and one we call the KNInfo, which you can access within our website. Now that helps you, especially on the social part. You will be able to get also time series. You can actually do cross tabulations yourself. But of course, this now requires a bit more sophisticated, users.
Then finally, probably, we've seen that you're running a campaign to do with a household survey. Is this a shift probably where Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is going to be increasing the scope of the things that it actually goes out to conduct surveys on?
No, you see, one is that the one you're talking about is household-based surveys are different from the economic surveys. The economic surveys, generally we do that based on what we call the business register, which we have a business of all, which we keep on updating. That's the one we sample businesses on. Now, the household budget survey is the one we use for household-based surveys. Now, what you've seen in the newspapers is we are now creating what we call the sampling frame. The sampling frame is generally, this is the fifth one. After every census, we actually create a sampling frame that helps us do surveys at different levels. So in other words, when you want national figures, when you sample, you can actually get, if you want the lower, it can actually sample so that it gives you a proper representative sample and weighting, so that when you collect the data, you can virtually generate, figures with very little standard errors at the lowest level. So that is actually currently what is. So we have just finished phase 1. We are on phase 2, and the one which was and then from there we'll move to phase 3. So that becomes the frame that we use to conduct any household-based surveys between now and the 10 years.
Thank you, Bwana DG.
Okay, thank you.
That has been Bwana Anthony Kilele from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, telling us more about data generation and how it's used in the economy. This has been the Executive Wing.
On to the money markets, and the Kenyan shilling is staring at a bleak future as most foreign investors exit government debt securities and importer demand for dollars goes high. To the greenback, the shilling is exchanging at an average of 85.16, while the sterling pound is trading at a mean of 134.10 against the euro. The home unit is exchanging at 107.85, while closer home, the South African rand is trading at 10.18. On Your Question Answered tonight, we ask what the process of accessing credit from the Youth Fund is and what the repayment plans might be.
Thank you. It is important that the youth out there are aware of our two major channels of disbursement. One is through the constituency vetting committees that are now being handled in our regional offices. Under this component, the youth will form themselves into groups that must be registered. They will approach either our offices in the regions, and currently we have 10 offices stationed in the former provincial headquarters under the previous constitution. You will find youth fund officers there, or they can approach our constituency officers who are currently domiciled or stationed in each and every Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports offices countrywide. Or they can also come directly to the Youth Fund headquarters in Nairobi at the National Bank building headquarters. Now, this youth will either form themselves into groups, go to these offices, fill the application forms, they will be vetted. This component does not attract any interest. However, it attracts a 5% one-off management fee. The form will guide the youth in terms of how much do they require, what do they want to do, what are the costs and the revenues that are being forecasted for them to be able to be given the loan that is adequate for their needs.
Thank you very much. Well, that's all we had time for on this edition of KTN Business Weekly. Thank you very much for watching. Let's do it again next Wednesday. We do want to hear from you. The email address is ktnbizweekly@standardmedia.co.ke. The SMS number 8041. From the entire KTN Business Weekly team and myself, Michael Oyer. Good night.
Business Weekly, brought to you by National Social Security Fund, NSSF. We secure your future.